rules apply. And I know like on the high school level, at least in North Platte, because we're a fairly conservative community, when I say theatrical intimacy, it's like kissing and like holding hands and hugging, because if I did anything more than that, you gross, A, and B, I'd be run out of town. So don't let this whole idea scare you of like, oh, I'm never gonna do that in my show. You probably do, because we all tell really interesting stories, and love stories are interesting stories to tell. But just take this with a grain of, not a grain of salt, but how it can fit best into your program. So I didn't go to school to become a teacher. That was never on my radar. I went to school, my undergrad is just in theater, my graduate degree is just in theater. So I've done a lot of theater over the years, and I've had lots of directors that just haven't ever asked what I was comfortable doing. This was a show in college we did was Tartuffe, and the director was like, yeah, he's gonna, in a funny way, pretend to rape you, and you're in a funny way gonna try to get away. And that was the only blocking that we received. I was going to a super small private Christian university. I'm a little bit chubby, so I'm not super comfortable with my body to begin with, and they put me in a corset and throw me on a table that's on a raked stage, and I was so worried about body parts popping out that I couldn't even focus on the scene. And then we did Crazy for You, and if you know that show, there's lots of mistaken identities, and they kiss them, and this person kisses them, and this person kisses them, and everybody's kissing each other. And we just showed up at rehearsal one day, and she's like, hey, today you guys are gonna start kissing. And it was like, oh, okay. And I, at the time, this guy had a crush on the female lead in the show. I was sure I was gonna marry one of the other dudes in the show who definitely did not feel anything back for me, but in my heart, I was just sure. And so things were all sorts of level of complicated. And I had to be the one, I was playing Irene, and I had to be the one to kiss him. And I'm like, I have kissed 2 boys in my life, and I don't know what I'm doing. And so with that came, when I came into coaching, it was kind of a tumultuous battle, but with that I knew the kind of director I wanted to be was to protect my students' bodies and their hearts. Because at the end of the day, we're teaching children. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. So this means for us as educators that you do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, you do better. We have all probably made some mistakes in our directing career where we look back and think, I wish I wouldn't have done that, whether it's blocking or costuming or sometimes casting. You miscast somebody and you just wish you could change and you couldn't. So I don't want you to walk away feeling bad or feeling like, well, I've made a mistake or she's judging me. I'm not. I just want to help you know better, and these are things that I've learned myself. So my signposting, because I'm speechy, even though I'm going to have 4 points, is we're going to talk about how you build trust, how to plan and prepare and build your rehearsal process, how to use the right words, and then how to help students de-roll. So when you are building trust, one of the first things you can do to build trust is in your audition process, and just let them know that you're a safe person. I do that for me by making sure that I have pronoun specifications on my sheet, as well as whether or not their parents know that, because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And then being very specific on the call sheet as to what that role entails. So I did a show a couple years ago where there was a student who was a character that was talking about their sexuality. And I have some students who couldn't care less. They come from really open homes, things are fine, but then I have other students that come from pretty conservative households and they would have gotten in a fair amount of trouble. Same thing if you've got characters talking about self-harm or eating disorders or a death in the family. Sometimes it just hits a little too close to home. And giving, I always do be silly, so from absolutely not to easy peasy for sure, helps me kind of gauge where they would sit if they were cast in that role. Also, if you have any other sort of physical interactions, this was a show that some students and I wrote a few years ago that had lots of fight choreography in it, and intrigue and like court espionage and arranged marriages and things like that. So there was lots of intense scenes, and there was one scene that was almost a little bit domestic assault-ish, and that can be a little bit concerning for students to play something so intense. And sometimes it depends on the person that they're with. We have some, you have some kids with your cast that are absolutely best friends forever, and then someone does something stupid and they never talk again. And you can say, oh yeah, you just have to push through it, and you can, but just know that it's a little bit more of a struggle if you don't know that going into it. Oh, these people are comfortable working together, these people are not. I'm gonna try to fuss with that as best I can. Okay, does it sometimes mess with your casting? Yes. It can be very frustrating and annoying sometimes. But does it save you a headache later on? So much more so, because you're not having these big, long conversations with both parties. Like, I need you to be comfortable with this, and why can't you be adults? Because they're not adults. And it just makes things a lot easier, and then it just really protects the mental and physical and emotional health of your students. So another way you can really build trust is ensuring physical safety. And that's typically something most of us just automatically do, but really thinking through, okay, I have a student on a platform. Are they comfortable on that platform? Do we need to have a railing on it? This was a show that had a lot of fight choreography, and we were using stage combat steel. It's not sharp, but it's still steel, and you poke somebody with it, and it hurts. You whack somebody with it, and it leaves a bruise. And so making sure you have specific rules for those moments. So kids knew with our swords, you didn't touch them if they weren't yours. And if they were yours, you were wearing them or you were doing the choreography. There wasn't playing with them. We had a process of you marked it first, you did it at half speed, and then you did it at full speed. And we also do that when we have to do some physical intimacy as well. And it just helps students know, hey, when I come into this space, I know my body is safe, and that's a concern for my director. Another really big thing that we continue to learn more about with SEL stuff is just protecting the mental and emotional health of your students. So, daily check-ins with your students, it's a lot. I have like 52 kids, and some of you have double that in your one-act cast, which just blows me away, and I still don't know how you do it. But whether that's checking in of like, oh, I know this student is going through a breakup, or they told me last week their parents are getting a divorce, and just kind of knowing what's going on in their lives help me kind of keep tabs on things. All students now that will come in and be like, McD, I had a big fight with my mom this morning. Can you just write my notes down and not say them to me out loud today? I just can't handle it. Perfect. No problem. I'll still give you the notes and they still want them, but that allows me to kind of protect them a little bit and helps us advance the show in the ways that we need to. Also kind of knowing if you need to do some group check-ins as well. We had a situation this past year where our school called, the names always change. The school's called a secure, which meant that there was like a police chase going on in the neighborhood and they wanted to lock everybody out. But they said, we're going into a secure, locks lights out of sight. And like, well, wait, that's two different things. And we were supposed to be having a fire drill in the next 15 minutes. And so I was like, well, okay, is this a drill that they just wanted to give us a heads up that it was going to be some sort of drill, but then it was a different one? And we sat in lockdown for a solid 20, 25 minutes not knowing what was going on at the end of the day. And so we had to go to rehearsal. And I could have just said, okay guys, I know that was a mess, we're all super stressed out, we're gonna start. And it would have been terrible. But instead we blasted the church clap, which is my least favorite dance because it's so sweaty. And they did the church clap full on, we laughed until we cried, and then we were able to start rehearsal. So just being aware of where your students are at individually, but then also as a group, really builds that trust and allows you to do things like fight choreography and intimacy in a little bit better level, and in a way that they feel like they can trust you to tell you things. The big thing, the book I'm going to show you later, the big thing it talks about is your job is to create vulnerability between your students and not chemistry. Kids don't know the difference. I don't know the difference sometimes as an adult. And you watch TV shows, you think of like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie and Kristen Stewart and Rob Pattinson, and all the different couples that fall in love on set because they're playing each other's love interest. And this helps change that. And it's this idea that, yeah, my character loves your character, but I just trust you as a castmate and a friend. I don't love you that way, I love you, but I don't love you that way. And that's okay, but that trust is there, and that trust will communicate on stage like love, but in a way that still guards students' hearts and helps you have, it helps you decrease the, oh, Mrs. McDaniel, I think I love him. No, you don't. He's a straight boy and a tenor in a theater. That's all it is. It's not really love. There's just not many other options, okay? So just relax. Give it 2 weeks after the show closes, and you're gonna be like, oh, yeah, no. Okay, so promoting this and not saying, well, I need you to build chemistry with them, that's not gonna go well for you, but to say, hey, I need you to be vulnerable and honest with them and build a friendship with them allows you to create a safe space for them, and then they feel more comfortable with the people they're working with. Another hard and fast rule within my program is we ask permission every time, always. Most students will be pretty honest with you if you ask them, hey, are there any parts of your body you're not comfortable being touched with? I had a student a couple years ago that she could not handle being touched around her neck and her shoulders. And we were doing Midsummer's Night Dream, and so that we had to make some accommodations for that, but she had a sexual assault, and she just said, I can't have you touch my hair, I can't have you touch my neck. Okay, no problem. There are times, as a director, we did Mary Poppins, not for a one act, but for a musical a couple years ago, and we were flying people. And you have to, the requirement with the flight company is you have to have an adult do the rigging on them, and so you're up in the students' lady parts, and every time it's like, hey, can I help put your harness on? Are you okay if I tighten this here? This is a former student, Joseph, who I had worked with really closely for 4 years. He helped write this show. And I knew he was comfortable being touched because Mike Pack was acting up on our last dress rehearsal, and I could tell that it was throwing him off because he was frustrated because he knew it wasn't coming through. And so I just walked up on stage, came up behind him and said, hey, are you okay if I mess with your Mike Pack? And he, without even skipping a beat, didn't even break character, said, yeah, no problem, and went right back into the scene. And lots of times students will laugh every time I ask them, hey, can I touch your shoulder? Hey, we're trying to build a stage picture, right? Especially with one act, you're trying to build these big ensemble pictures, and sometimes it takes too long to be like, okay, you just down a little bit and tilt your chin just, and it's too much. And so you can go in and physically rearrange them, but you do have to ask permission every time. Because some days you just have a day where you just don't want it, or you maybe were mad the next day, or one day, but then the next day you're fine. So then you have done all this work to build trust within your cast, and then it makes the planning and preparing process so much easier when you get into rehearsal. So for us, this looks like warming up and focusing, so everybody comes with the same intent. We prepare and block our scenes beforehand, but then there's also flexibility and then making sure you have privacy within the first run-throughs. Wait. This is a hard and fast rule, and I will die on this hill, and you can disagree with me, and that's totally okay, but for my program and what I firmly believe in, there is no reason whatsoever that any student should have to make any physical contact with anybody that they don't want to, romantic or otherwise. If you are doing this, I'm gonna judge you just a little bit. And be like, bro, you're teaching 15-year-olds. Stop, okay? There are always other options. Right, yes, this scene has to have a kiss. Does it have to be a real kiss, or can it be a stage kiss? They're supposed to kiss here. Do we need a kiss to tell the story, or can it just be an embrace? Can it be a kiss on the forehead? Can it be a moment right before, and then it blacks out before the kiss happens? Just give yourself some freedom to not push students to do something because you feel like that's the story that you have to tell. And people will say, but we are training them to be professionals. I work at a high school in North Platte, Nebraska. Okay, we have 1,200 students. I love them all. Do some of them want to go on and be professional Broadway performers? Yes. And some of them will go on to do theater in college and whatever. But for the most part, that's horse hockey. You're not training them to be professionals. I love you all, but we're teaching in high schools in Nebraska. It's hard, we don't have the money access, we don't have the location access to really big professional programs. And that's fine because that's not why I do theater. I don't do theater for kids to go on and do it professionally. I do theater because I think theater makes kids good human beings. And it tells important stories and teaches kids things about themselves that they wouldn't learn in other ways. So know that you can tell good stories and you can teach kids things without being I have to train them to be professionals and they need to learn how to sacrifice their bodies and whatnot. No. And all of this stuff we're going to talk about next is all stuff that's happening on the professional level as well. You don't hardly see a Broadway show, a movie, a TV show that doesn't have an intimacy coordinator on it anymore because it's just become the norm. And there's always going to be a power dynamic between you and your students that will keep them from being 100% honest with you. Our kids all talk to each other. They all Snapchat each other and follow each other on Instagram, and all my girls this past year were obsessed with the stage manager from Holdridge, right? And they follow each other, that's what they do. And then they know each other from student council and from FFA and different things. And there were shows this past year that kids were hearing from other students being I don't know how to tell my director I'm not comfortable kissing with them. Or they're making me do the scene where I get carried off stage and I am so self-conscious about my body and I don't know how to tell them I wish we could find another way to do this. And so you can build trust, that's what you should be doing, but also know that this is there. And no matter what you do, that will still always be there. And so it's your job to continue to work with students to say, hey, what can I do to continue to build this trust? If there's something that you're not comfortable doing, you have to tell me. Because I don't know, and because you're all really good at faking it and being like, oh yes, right away, Mickey, no problem. And if you tell me that, that's all that I know. But making sure your students know they can come to you and say, hey, I'm not comfortable doing this. Now, obviously, there's a line where if you have a student that's just whining all the time, to be like, hey, maybe we need to have a conversation about how this role is not the right role for you, or we need to switch things around. But for the most part, if the student says, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, please believe them. Because that's never going to get you in trouble. Versus saying, no, I don't believe you, I'm going to make you do this, then sometimes that's when you get phone calls from parents and school board members and other people that just get a little grumpy with you. So when it comes to planning, things that help me do better with theatrical intimacy, and we did Antigone this past year for our one act, and so I'm going to use that for a lot of examples within this process. I make sure that kids get the schedule and they come audition so they know what scenes we're doing when. Because it allows them, oh, this is the day we're doing the fight call for the big scene between the ensemble and Creon. We know we're doing this scene here where Haman finds Antigone dead, and then he kills himself, and Creon runs back to Eurydice. It's like they know which days are coming, so that when they come into the rehearsal that day, they can say, oh, yep, I am ready for this scene, and I know what's going on. We also take time to break down the goal of the scene and to make sure our blocking supports that. And then always having a backup plan, because sometimes things don't go according to plan. And I always schedule first runs and first through blockings after rehearsal. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So like I said, with our scheduling, we make sure that it is specific so kids know what we're doing, what, and when. This is the dance call, this is a fight call, this is where we're going to choreograph this death scene. This is when we're doing this kind of intimate moment on the hilltop, just so that kids know. For us with warm-ups, we find that warm-ups help us kind of all work towards a common goal and get focused in the same spot, and so you don't have so much of the gigglies when it comes time to do those romantic scenes or those intense scenes. Right, so we oftentimes have our kids take 3 to 4 minutes of silence when they first come in. They'll be like, hey, like welcome, and they chit-chat, right, and drink their coffee and check their phones and whatnot. But then we just turn off the lights and sit in silence. And that helps them kind of brush off the day and kind of get ready to do rehearsal. And then whatever sort of warm-ups your groups like to do, our kids really like body scanning. We call it 1, 2, 3, up, down, but other people call it different things. Like you put your head down and then you look up and try to make eye contact. Like whatever sort of group kind of bonding warm-up that you do to help your students regulate their bodies and prepare their minds for rehearsal is super important. And some days I get into rehearsal, I'm like, hey, like I want to go. Like I said we were going to block 20 pages today because I'm nutsy when I made the schedule. And we've got to get through this. But I know if I do that, then it rushes everybody else, it breaks down that trust, and then it will make the rehearsal fall apart when it comes time to do those fight scenes. The next thing we look at is what is the goal of the scene and does your blocking support that? So this was the end scene in Blue Stockings, which if you have not read Blue Stockings, you need to because it is just the most beautiful play. And in this scene, Will and Tess, who have had this, like, he loves her, but she loves somebody else, but she wants to study and be a scientist, but she can't graduate from Cambridge and all these things. And this is the ending moment where they're at the train station, and she decides to come and say, yeah, will you wait for me? And he's like, yeah, of course. And in the blocking, all it said is they embrace. You're like, oh. Right? And in that moment, for the goal we wanted to have for that moment was that they, even though this is the end of the show, we wanted you to see that this was not the end of Will and Tess's story. Right? There's a whole lot told in a final embrace before the blackout of like, oh, are they going to stay together? And is she going to come back from Peru and still love him? And all these things. And so they had originally said, well, we want to do this big hug. And they were friends, they were comfortable with each other, we'd had the conversations. It didn't seem to be a problem, and it was like, well, a big hug would be lovely. And that's what we would do today. Like, I'm a hugger, I love to hug people. But for this time period, in 1898, you would not have hugged somebody in public, especially a member of the opposite sex that you're not attached to. And so having that conversation of what does that embrace look like? And for us, it was literally her holding onto his lapels a little bit and him just gently touching her face, and he tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. So not a traditional embrace that you would think of, but it allowed our goal for the scene to be supported by the blocking in a way that was truthful, A, to the time period, and then truthful to what our actors were feeling in that moment. And so don't feel like you have to be glued to what the stage directions say. Like, there's always flexibility in that. Physical contact blocking is not the time to make it up on the fly. Like, we went in with plans, and yeah, we had to do some flexibility with that, but it's never good to show up to rehearsal where you're going to be blocking a kiss or blocking some fight choreography. And like, yeah, okay, like you're going to be in groups, and you punch each other, and you shove each other, but like fall careful, don't like stick your wrist out, because that's bad. You know, like you need to go in with a fairly specific plan. And however blocking works for you, to write it down or to record it or however you notate it, this is stuff that has to be done in advance, just so that you feel more confident and then your students feel that confidence, and then you can have conversations around that as you go through the process. Because then you have to be flexible when stuff changes. Right, we had a plan for this scene where she had been begging him the whole time to run away with her because they knew this king was going to try to kill them both and they just needed to go. Or he had been, sorry. And she was like, no, we're fine, we're fine. And finally, the second or third time they had the conversation in the show, he was supposed to grab her and drag her and say, no, we're going. And no matter what we tried, like they were comfortable doing it, that you could tell their bodies were comfortable doing with it, it just didn't work. And so I said, okay, what do you, told Joseph, I said, what does your character Killian want in this moment? He's like, I want her to realize how serious I am about wanting to run away with her. And I was like, okay, well, what do you then need to show her that? And he's like, I want to kneel down before her and like hug her down low, like almost like a child, right? And like, no, Mom, I'm not going. I want to like dead weight. And so we talked that through with Tuesday, and he's a tall glass of water. And so his head was going to hit like right on her stomach, which then was he wasn't going to like get a bosom face or, you know, anywhere else. And so that worked really, really well because we took a moment of like, hey, we had this blocking, it's not working, let's now try something else. And then I always say the first blockings and run-throughs until the end of rehearsal after everybody's done. When we blocked that scene with Joseph and Tuesday, we had done our regular rehearsal for the day, had done group notes at the end, and so, okay, everybody else can go, and now Danny and Joseph are just going to stay behind. If they want friends to stay behind, I let them pick one or two. I've got an assistant director now, which I didn't have at the time, but so now we have a second adult in the area, which also just feels a little bit more safe. But then that takes some of the pressure off that they don't have 40 of their closest friends staring at them as they're trying to figure out what to do with their bodies. So then the last kind of big chunk I'll talk about before we talk about de-rolling is saying the right thing. And I could talk and talk and talk, but really everything is plagiarized from this book. It's a really unfortunate name. I hate having it on my shelf at school because it makes kids giggle. So it's one that I put in backwards, like so they can't see that it says staging sex on the side. But you can tell I live in it. Like I've got tabs all over the place. Every page is highlighted, underlined, and notes and things. I'm talking too long, so we're gonna breeze through this a little bit. But the main thing this book talks about, and it's like $20 on Amazon. I don't have a link in my storefront, just go buy one, I don't make a commission off of it. It's to desexualize your language and have specific blocking. So this idea of you open and close distances instead of stalking someone or running away from them or pursuing them. Because those create emotions within your body when you say, hey, I want you to stalk them, versus I want you to close the distance between them. Right, and that can be really body specific as well. Like I want you to close the distance between your shoulders, but keep the distance between your hips kind of open. Right, so you have this little like side shoulder nudge. That's this little cute thing. And I could say, hey, I just want you to keep boop them on the shoulder, but again, that creates that emotion within the body that we're trying to avoid. Then levels of touch. This is another thing that my students find really important. I don't use the touching, moving, pulling so much, but skin, muscle, and bone, powder, paint, and clay. So I want you to powder touch them on the shoulder. When you grab her, I need it to be muscle level. And it helps students know what level of depth they need to be touching, and that creates different moments. With Eurydice's and Antigone, she started with powder touching crayon to let him know, hey, I need you to calm down, but by the end of the show, she was bone level grabbing him because he just wasn't listening. And then tempos and counts can help students not be so nervous leading up to those moments, and then help you sell the moments afterwards, whether it's a fight or a kiss. Like, I need you to close the distance for a count of 5, and then open the distance in a count of 2. Right, and it allows them to kind of find that inner cadence in their body, and they're thinking about the counts rather than thinking about, well, do I like him? Is my breath smelly? And all those other things that go through their head. If you're looking to level up in the book also does a great job talking about eye contact and breath control, and how you breathe faster when you're in a fight or the moment before or after a kiss, things like that, and how you find power shifts in a way that is safe and protective of your students. And then the last part, now the show is over or the rehearsal is over, now what? And you really have to help your students de-roll. And to leave it on the stage. Antigone was a pretty intense show, and so we would oftentimes come together at the end and say, okay, like, how's everybody doing? Are we set to go? And I know my kids love to do serious stuff. They like to do gory things where people die and there's fights and whatnot. But then you have to take a moment and help kids remember as I'm taking off their makeup. Like, I'm taking off Antigone and I'm putting back on Brittany. I'm taking off Antigone's clothes and then putting back on Brittany's clothes. And it feels silly, but for them to say it out verbally or to think it through in their brain really helps them come back into their own bodies. I also encourage a ton of play after rehearsal. Like, you want to have a lightsaber fight or a water balloon battle, or you want to go drive around and sing Hamilton, blasting out in your car with your friends until 11 p.m., please do that, because it helps you come back into you. And then the last thing I really do is help them develop their own connections and communicate what they need within the show. Our Creon this past year is down here in the white with the blue tie, and he is the sweetest little kid, and kind of got thrown into Creon 2 days before our first competition. And so it was a role he really had to stretch himself for. It was a role he was uncomfortable with because Creon has to be so violent, and that is not Braxton at all. And he really struggled, so he spent a lot of time. Derek there in the yellow was his assistant for the show, and he and Derek had lots of conversations of like, hey, before we go on to the scene where I yell at you, can we just high five and like have a hug before we go on so that I know that we're okay? And then when I come off, can we also have that check-in as well, that like we are off stage and now I'm Braxton and you're Derek and we're not Creon and Cicero. And so really letting kids kind of explore what they need as well and giving them space to do that is important. So this is a quote from a student, and I won't read it out loud because it's super long, but when I had a student that I was telling her I was doing this presentation, she's like, great, I'm gonna send you this. And so from a student perspective, she just says how much she has respected me because I listen to the students first and I make sure they're good to go. And she said, it always takes me away from the story and often left me with a bad taste in my mouth, imagining what it would be like for students to be in their shoes, especially when they told me they were uncomfortable but didn't know how to tell their directors when we watch other intimacy happen on stage. So have honest conversations with your students. It's scary. Sometimes it takes admitting like maybe you've done some bad practice in the past or you didn't know better. But start this year to build trust among them. And build trust, plan to prepare, use the right words and help students de-roll. And just be the you that you needed in high school if you were a performer in high school or college or in a community playhouse where you didn't feel respected. And learn and grow and continue to advocate for your students and for their mental and physical health. So that's all I got.